Have you ever felt a kind of pain that doesn't scream, but slowly dissolves who you are? Not the kind that comes from heartbreak or failure, but the kind that creeps in silently when you wake up one day and realize you've been performing your life instead of living it. You've smiled when you wanted to scream, nodded yes when your soul was begging you to say no, all for one reason: to be accepted, to belong. But in doing that, somewhere along the way, you abandoned the part of you that didn't fit the script. And now when you look in the mirror, the reflection stares back empty, not because you're broken, but because you've been edited. You see, Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But nobody tells you how painful that process can be, how much of yourself you have to let go of before you meet who you really are. So if you feel lost, numb, or disconnected, this video is for you. Not to diagnose you, but to remind you that the quiet ache inside your chest isn't failure, it's your soul knocking, asking to come home. And maybe, just maybe, what you're going through isn't falling apart. It's the shedding of a false self, so that something more real can finally begin. Have you ever felt something stirring inside you? Something dark, uncomfortable, but oddly familiar. Carl Jung didn't romanticize that darkness. He respected it. To Jung, the shadow wasn't evil. It wasn't something to destroy or escape from. It was a hidden part of the self, waiting to be acknowledged, integrated, and understood. Real light, he said, doesn't come from polishing our image into perfection. It comes from facing what we've buried, what we've denied, what we've judged as unacceptable. Think about it. Anger. It's often a boundary that was never respected. Jealousy. It's a desire we were taught to be ashamed of. Procrastination or laziness. Maybe it's not about being lazy at all, but a silent rebellion against a life that feels soulless. You see, these emotions aren't flaws. They are messengers, signals from the subconscious, whispering what the conscious mind refuses to hear. Jung called this hidden side the shadow. But here's the truth. The shadow isn't your enemy. It's your compass. It points to the exact place inside you where healing needs to happen, where your real voice lives, where your repressed creativity, rage, power, and passion are all waiting untouched, unloved, unseen. We live in a world obsessed with light. But what if the most powerful transformation doesn't happen under the spotlight, but in the dim room where you finally sit down with your darkest truth? The moment you stop running from your pain, the moment you choose to look at it without judgment, is the moment you stop being a prisoner to it. So if you're feeling triggered, restless, or lost, maybe it's not because you're broken. Maybe it's because your shadow is knocking and it's time to answer. Let's get honest for a moment. Most of what we call self-awareness is just a polished mask, a socially acceptable version of ourselves that we've carefully crafted over years, sometimes even decades. We say what's expected, smile when we don't feel like it, nod in agreement when our soul is silently screaming no. But here's the real question. Who are you when no one's watching? When there's no mirror, no audience, no validation, who's left? Carl Jung warned us about this. He said the greatest tragedy isn't the darkness we carry. It's pretending that we've already healed it. Every time life triggers you, whether it's rejection, jealousy, frustration, it's not an enemy. It's a teacher, a signal from your inner world pointing to a part of you that's been neglected, denied, or misunderstood. What if instead of reacting or numbing it, you got curious? What if you sat with your anger and asked, what boundary of mine was crossed? What if you met your jealousy with compassion and whispered, what part of me feels unloved or forgotten? You see, healing doesn't come from killing the darkness. It comes from facing it gently, consistently, honestly. It comes from realizing that the parts of you you've been trying to hide, are the exact places where your power, your truth, your freedom lives. Stop pretending. Stop over-polishing the image. The world doesn't need another perfect mask. It needs your authentic soul. So if today you feel exhausted from pretending, that's not weakness, that's the invitation. Come home to yourself. Let me ask you something personal. What if I told you that your negative emotions aren't problems to be fixed, but messages waiting to be heard? We're so used to thinking of anger, envy, sadness, or exhaustion as things we need to get rid of. But what if we've been misunderstanding them all along? Carl Jung taught that our so-called shadow, the part of us we try to hide or deny, isn't evil. It's misunderstood. It's not a threat. It's a resource. Your anger. That's not just rage. It's protective energy. It's your soul's way of saying a boundary has been crossed. Your jealousy, not something to be ashamed of. It's a compass pointing directly toward what your heart deeply desires but doesn't feel worthy of. Your fatigue. Maybe it's not laziness. Maybe your body is whispering, I can't carry this weight anymore. You see, every negative emotion is simply unprocessed truth. A fire burning beneath the surface, waiting to be seen and redirected. And here's the shift. When you stop rejecting these feelings, when you listen to them, hold them, understand them, they stop acting out in chaos and start showing up as power. That same anger can become clarity and courage. That envy, it becomes vision. And your sadness, it opens the door to depth, compassion, and creativity. You don't need to destroy your shadow. You need to integrate it, because integration is transformation. That's how leaders are made, not from being flawless, but from being fully aware. Not from avoiding discomfort, but from learning to dance with it. So the next time something triggers you, instead of running from it or numbing it, ask yourself, what is this emotion really trying to tell me? And listen like your life depends on it. Because in many ways it does. Your most painful emotions, they're not your enemies. They're your fuel. The question is, will you burn out from suppressing them, or will you rise by transforming them? Let's be honest. Knowing what's wrong isn't the same as doing something about it. We live in an age of self-awareness overload. We can name our childhood wounds, quote, shadow work, recite affirmations, even track our triggers with a journal. But none of that matters if it doesn't translate into action. Carl Jung didn't study the psyche to keep it trapped in theory. He believed in integration through experience. Transformation doesn't live in your thoughts. It lives in your decisions, in your courage to take that next uncertain step. And here's the hard truth. Many people are stuck in what I call the healing loop. They consume endless content, attend workshops, listen to meditations, but they're still waiting. Still hesitating, still living the same life in the same patterns, just with more language to describe their pain. But healing is not a philosophy. It's a practice. Jung said, you are what you do not, what you say you'll do. So ask yourself, what are you actually doing differently? Because clarity comes from engagement, not contemplation. Are you still saying, I'm not ready? Guess what no one ever is? Growth doesn't wait for readiness. It demands willingness. Willingness to take the first step even when your hands are shaking. Willingness to speak the truth even when your voice trembles. Willingness to walk away from what's familiar even if it once felt like home. Every action, no matter how small, rewires your identity. Every time you choose integrity over approval, truth over comfort, or purpose over fear, you are becoming the version of yourself that your soul has been longing for. And yes, it will be uncomfortable. Yes, it may disrupt relationships, old habits, even your self-image. But what's the cost of staying still? So if you're listening right now and thinking, I know what I need to do, but that but is the prison you built around your potential. Break it. You don't need more books. You need more bravery. You don't need another sign. You need a single step forward. This is the moment, not when you feel ready, but when you decide to move anyway, because in the end, change doesn't come from what you know. It comes from what you're willing to live. There's a common misconception we need to talk about. Most people think they're stuck because they're lazy, unmotivated, or lacking discipline. But if you peel back the layers, really look beneath the surface, it's not laziness that holds them back. It's fear. Fear is the quiet architect of our paralysis. Fear of failure. Fear of being seen for who we really are. Fear of success and what might be required of us if we actually rise into our potential. Carl Jung once said, "Where your fear is, there is your task." That quote alone could transform your life if you're willing to sit with it. See, fear doesn't always come dressed in panic or dread. It's subtle. It disguises itself as overthinking. It wears the mask of perfectionism, telling you to wait until you're ready. It hides behind procrastination, whispering, "Just one more day." But the truth is, every time you delay your dreams, your growth, your voice, it's not your schedule that's too busy. It's your subconscious that's terrified, afraid of rejection, afraid of judgment, afraid of change, and perhaps even afraid of your own light. Because stepping into who you really are means burning down everything you built just to be accepted. And that's terrifying. But what's more terrifying, living your whole life caged by what you never dared to face. Imagine this. Every time you feel that internal resistance, that, I don't want to do this sensation, that's not a stop sign. That's a doorway. It's not telling you don't go there. It's inviting you in. What if instead of backing away from fear, you lean toward it, not to conquer it like a battle, but to understand it as a teacher? Fear is not your enemy. It's your compass. It points you to the edges of your current self and asks, will you expand or will you retreat? Ask yourself, what am I really afraid of right now? And what would I do if fear wasn't running the show? Your healing doesn't begin with comfort. It begins where your excuses end, right there at the boundary line between your known self and your possible self. And yes, it will be messy. Yes, you might tremble. Yes, there's risk, but also there's freedom. The kind of freedom that doesn't come from achieving something, but from no longer needing to hide. So here's your challenge if you're willing to take it. Find the thing you've been avoiding, the conversation, the decision, the action, and take one tiny step toward it, not because you're fearless, but because you're done letting fear drive. The most powerful version of you isn't fearless. They just learned how to walk forward, even with fear sitting in the passenger seat. Let me ask you something that might sting a little. When did we start believing that life has to be perfect to be meaningful? Think about it. How often do we chase happiness like it's something clean, polished, soft-lit, as if our worth is tied to how well we hold it together? But life, real life, doesn't always look like that. Sometimes meaning isn't found in the bright moments. It's born from the darkest ones. Carl Jung said, "Even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness," and the word happy would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness. That's not just a poetic line. It's a truth most of us resist. We want transformation without discomfort, joy without grief, clarity without confusion. But here's what no one teaches us. The ugly parts of your journey, they are the sacred parts, that moment when your world falls apart. The job loss, the heartbreak, the diagnosis, the silence after betrayal. That's not the end. That's the threshold. Because meaning doesn't come from things going your way. It comes from how you show up when they don't. You see, pain isn't here to punish you. It's here to wake you up. Each breakdown, every anxiety spiral, all the quiet nights you spend wondering why me, they're invitations. Not to escape, but to integrate. We live in a world obsessed with improvement, with becoming better, brighter, more successful. But true healing doesn't always look like rising. Sometimes it looks like sitting in the rubble and saying, I'm still here, and I won't abandon myself again. Maybe your anxiety isn't a flaw, it's your soul signaling something isn't aligned. Maybe your failures aren't setbacks, but sacred redirections. Maybe the parts you label too messy are the exact places your wisdom is waiting to grow. Think about this. What if the version of you you're most ashamed of is actually the one who's done the deepest work? What if that version deserves your compassion, not your contempt? Carl Jung didn't teach us to run from the shadow. He taught us to sit with it, to learn its language, to find meaning within the mess, not in spite of it. And once you do that, once you stop dividing your life into good and bad, and instead look at all of it as meaningful, that's when real peace starts to grow. Not perfection, but peace. So if you're in a place right now where things feel dark, chaotic, uncertain, let me remind you, this isn't a detour. This is the path. And maybe, just maybe, the most important thing you'll ever do is stop running from the ugly part of your story and start honoring it. We're all taught to look for purpose, as if it's some hidden treasure buried beneath the surface of life, something we'll stumble upon one day if we just meditate enough, read enough, heal enough. But what if that's the wrong question entirely? What if purpose isn't something you find, but something you forge? Carl Jung once wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." And that's the thing. Purpose doesn't come to you as a lightning bolt. It's not some divine whisper in the dark. It's the shape your life takes after you've walked through fire. It's the story that rises after the breakdown, the pattern that forms as you keep showing up day after day, despite the confusion, despite the pain. Real purpose is built, not found. It's constructed moment by moment from the smallest acts of courage, from choosing to keep going when you'd rather quit, from saying yes to something uncertain, from turning your wounds into wisdom, not walls. Let me ask you, are you waiting for a sign, or are you becoming one? You see, the modern world sells you the myth that purpose is clarity, but the truth, purpose is direction that comes from doing, not waiting. Clarity is often a side effect of motion. Action creates clarity. And strangely enough, suffering often creates direction. Think back to the hardest chapter of your life. What did it reveal to you? What did it burn away? What did it force you to see? That pain wasn't meaningless. It carved something into you. Maybe that scar is where your greatest calling begins. Because here's the truth most people won't tell you. Your true purpose often feels heavy. It doesn't sparkle at first. It shows up disguised as responsibility, or heartbreak, or a quiet whisper that says, "This isn't who I am meant to be." And so you change. You rebuild. You create meaning where there was once only survival. You don't need to figure out your purpose before you move. You need to move so your purpose has something to shape itself around. Don't wait for inspiration. Don't wait for the perfect path. Don't wait until the fear is gone. Begin. Begin with the pain. Begin with the mess. Begin with what you know, even if it's small. Because in the end, purpose isn't a noun. It's a verb. It's the way you meet life every single day. With presence, with courage, with your soul still open despite the scars. And when you stop looking for it like it's lost, you start becoming it. Let's talk about something we rarely admit out loud. There are people who own a room not because of their kindness, but because of their presence. Their power isn't always warm. Sometimes it's sharp, intimidating, even dangerous. And here's the unsettling truth. They have power because they dared to touch their shadow. Carl Jung didn't see the shadow as a flaw to eliminate. He saw it as a gateway, a dark corridor every human must walk through to reclaim wholeness. But here's the twist. While manipulative and authoritarian people do access their shadow, they do it without consciousness. They weaponize it. They use their pain to dominate their fear, to control their wounds, to wound others. They've gone into the basement of the soul, but brought back the fire, not the wisdom. So the question is, what if you faced your shadow not with domination, but with depth, not with selfishness, but with awareness? Because when you approach your inner darkness with ethics, with humility, and with the courage to integrate it, you don't become dangerous, you become whole. Jung once said, the tree that would grow to heaven must send its roots to hell. That line hits hard, and it should. It means that the parts of you you've denied, your rage, your envy, your ambition, your grief, aren't wrong. They're raw power waiting for guidance. Imagine your anger not as destruction, but as a fierce protector of your boundaries. Imagine your envy not as poison, but as a compass pointing to the unlived parts of your soul. Imagine your sadness as the weight that grounds your empathy. When you repress these things, you don't become good. You become split, polite on the outside, but quietly resentful, numb, disconnected inside. The real danger isn't in feeling too much darkness. It's in pretending you don't have any. But when you meet your shadow with the light of awareness, something alchemical happens. You stop reacting. You start choosing. You stop fearing your darkness and begin learning from it. This doesn't mean becoming fearless. It means becoming integrated. Think about the strongest, most grounded people you've ever met. They're not the ones who've never been broken. They're the ones who've been shattered and built themselves back with truth. So I want to leave you with this. What part of you are you afraid to look at? What emotion have you locked away, calling it bad or unacceptable? Because maybe, just maybe, your greatest power is hiding in that very place. The world doesn't need more people performing perfection. It needs people brave enough to own their whole selves. That's not just healing, that's transformation. Have you ever felt exhausted, but not from work or responsibility or even stress, but from pretending? Let me ask you something. Are you truly tired from life? Or are you tired from constantly performing a version of yourself that no longer feels true? Because for many of us, it's not the weight of life that wears us down, it's the weight of the mask. You smile when you want to scream. You say yes when every cell in your body is begging to say no. You show up polished, agreeable, capable, while deep down your soul is starving for authenticity. And the world claps. It rewards the mask. It praises your discipline, your productivity, your pleasing nature. But your spirit, it knows. It knows what it had to sacrifice for approval. It knows how much silence you've swallowed, how many dreams you've shelved, how many truths you've buried just to fit in. Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But here's the hard part. Becoming yourself often means letting go of who the world told you to be. It's not easy. You may lose people. You may be misunderstood. You may disappoint those who only loved your performance, not your truth. But you know what's even harder. Staying in a life that's slowly killing your joy. Living in a version of you that feels like a costume. Waking up each day further from the freedom of your own soul. So I invite you, take the risk of being real. You weren't born to be liked by everyone. You weren't born to fit into every room. You weren't born to spend your precious years earning applause for someone you're not. You are here to be free. Free to speak what's in your heart. Free to honor your own boundaries. Free to say this no longer fits me without guilt. Free to come home not to a place, but to yourself. Because when you stop performing, something magical happens. Your energy returns. Your clarity sharpens, and the people who are meant for the real you begin to find you. This isn't about being reckless or rude. It's about being rooted. Rooted in who you are, even if it shakes the world around you. So if you've been feeling lost or tired lately, maybe it's not depression. Maybe it's not burnout. Maybe it's just your soul. finally asking you to come back, to come home, to the version of you that never needed a mask to be worthy, to the version of you that doesn't need to perform to be powerful. You don't need to be liked. You need to be liberated. Let's get honest for a moment. Your job title, your resume, your social media following, none of that truly defines you. And deep down, you know that. But it's easy to forget. It's easy to let the world convince you that meaning is something to be chased, something earned, proven, posted, validated. So you strive harder, climb higher, perform longer. But somewhere in the quiet moments, in the space between obligations and achievements, you feel it, that aching question. Is this really it? Carl Jung believed that the purpose of life isn't to become successful in the eyes of others, but to become whole in the eyes of your soul. And wholeness, it doesn't come from perfection. It comes from integration, from owning every part of yourself, especially the ones you were taught to hide. Your shadow is not a curse. It's a compass. That part of you that feels insecure, afraid, jealous, angry, it's not something to destroy. It's something to understand, to learn from, to reclaim, because the parts you've buried hold the key to your brilliance. What if I told you that the truest version of you isn't something you have to create? It's something you return to, not through hustle, not through image, but through remembrance. Who were you before the world told you who to be? That's where the real journey begins. You see, meaning doesn't just arrive one day like a lightning bolt. It's forged moment by moment every time you choose authenticity over approval, every time you face your fear instead of running from it, every time you speak your truth even if your voice shakes. That is purpose, that is power. So know your worth is not your title, not your status, not how many people clap for you. Your worth is your presence, your courage to be you, all of you without apology. That quiet strength you've been ignoring, that's your soul calling you home. This is your life, and you get to choose. Will you keep hiding in who you think you should be, or will you rise into who you really are? Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for the world to approve. Because the most meaningful thing you'll ever do is finally stop running from yourself and walk straight into the life that only you were born to live. That's not just healing, that's liberation. And in case no one told you lately, you don't need to become more. You need to return to what's already whole. The meaning of life is you.